The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 236.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Paul Mcgee, author of S.U.M.O, Shut Up, Move On, the straight-talking guide to succeeding in life. Welcome, Paul, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Delighted to be with you, Wade.
Before we take a deep dive into your book, will you take just a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you personally.
Sure. I'm known as the Mancunian motivator. I'm from Manchester in England. My background is in behavioral and social psychology, so the way people think, act, and behave has just fascinated me for years. I guess I'd describe myself as the reluctant entrepreneur or the accidental entrepreneur. Actually, lost my job many years ago through ill health. I became ill with an illness called chronic fatigue syndrome. Wasn't able to work for 3 years. When I felt well enough to get back into the workplace, no one would actually hire me because I couldn't pass a medical. So what I did 24 years ago was I hired myself. I was awesome at the interview, standout candidate. And I've been writing books, speaking to all kinds of audiences. I've spoken in 40 countries to date. And I work mainly in the private sector. I work with a couple of soccer teams in England and also in Australia. And also have the privilege of going to North America 2 or 3 times a year presenting my seminars.
So, Paul, first off, thank you for sharing that. And now let's jump right into your book. S.U.M.O, Shut Up, Move On, the straight-talking guide to succeeding in life, which was originally made available back in 2005, and the 10th anniversary edition it came out here in 2015. And you were telling me something beforehand, before we jumped on the interview.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people, particularly in the UK, they go, S.U.M.O, shut up, move on. Some people like the message. Some people think it's a little bit too aggressive. And in fact, 13 publishers in the UK said, we're not going to publish a book called Shut Up, Move On because no one will want to buy it. A small publisher went for it, said, we like it, it's quirky, it's different, but we want to manage your expectations. Number one, it might not even get into the bookstores. Number two, if it does, it'll probably have a shelf life of around 3, if we're really optimistic, 6 months. And 10 years later, it just reached number 1 in the non-fiction charts in the UK about 4 days ago.
They were only off by 9.5 years. So that's not too bad.
That's pretty good for a publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story because it's kind of an inspiration for those that are out there and maybe in the process of writing right now. But Paul, we're going to move quickly here through this interview. And that's because our whole goal here today is to cover those top questions that our listener, / future reader would like to get answered before they dive into your book. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing S.U.M.O, Shut Up, Move On?
Okay, there was 2 reasons. One, I needed to build my credibility and my profile. I kind of fit into that space of the motivational speaker. I think I'm far more than that, but that's what often people know me as. But I've not climbed Everest. I've not sailed around the world single-handedly. I've not had cancer. I've not lost my limbs in some landmine accident. I haven't got any gold medals from any Olympic Games. So what do? Well, writing a book that was both provocative, sticky, memorable, and ultimately helpful for people would be a great way, I thought, to raise my profile and establish my credibility. Secondly, the other inspiration, which was equally important, was, I was doing seminars on this material and people were coming back to me from all ages and backgrounds going, we love your S.U.M.O stuff. It's sticky, it's memorable, it's kind of easy to grasp, and we can use it immediately. And that just gave me the feedback and the encouragement that even when I was getting all those rejections, I should still press on with the idea. And ultimately, the book did raise my profile and establish my credibility.
That's excellent. And Paul, this question is so important. You and I were talking beforehand about how many books come out on a monthly basis. And so this next question, what makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
I think one of the things is I don't take myself too seriously. I cut to the chase. I use 5 words rather than 50. And a phrase I used before, people can grasp these ideas quickly and use them immediately. This is not like just rah-rah stuff. It's It's stuff where I don't just share my successes, I share my struggles. I bring in my own personal perspective on a lot of my material. And I think it also raises a little bit of a smile with people. They like the approach. It causes them to think, but it also causes them to smile as well. And I think the human element where I share my struggles certainly is something that people seem to appreciate and engage with. And hopefully for that reason, it means that I've managed to establish a fairly good following of people who've already read the book up until this point.
Paul, how did you design the book to be read? I mean, is this a book that people can jump in and jump out as they need, cherry picking information, if you will? Or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
Both, to be fair. I can be fairly logical and methodical in one way, but I have a set of SUMO principles. So a metaphor I often use when I'm describing my material is I'm building the SUMO house, and there is a foundation to that house, which the first point is I call it E plus R equals O. It's the event plus my response influences the outcome. And then there are various rooms in the house. Each contains a SUMO principle. And just as the listener or the reader could go in a house and decide which room they want to go in first, in many ways you could read my book like that as well. So it lends itself to certainly going from front to back. But you know what? You could dip into any of those rooms, explore a principle, and get some immediate insights that will help you straight away.
So Paul, we're to my favorite part of the entire interview. And that's where I want to, hand over the proverbial mic and allow you to take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really give this future reader a great idea of what your book's all about. So we take the next couple minutes and take a deep dive into the content.
Absolutely. And if I return to that metaphor, the SUMO house, the foundation to that house is this formula E plus R equals O. And it's helping the reader to understand that, look, events happen to all of us, but it's actually how we respond to those events that's going to influence our outcome. So, for instance, an entrepreneur like Richard Branson, back in the 70s, he's trying to establish his business. He's selling records via mail order. And then in the UK, there's a postal strike. So what do? Do I sort of send out invites to the pity party and say, woe is me, this is destroying my business? Or do you respond by taking responsibility and going, hang on a minute, okay, I can't get my products out to my customer via the normal way. Maybe I can get my customer to come to me. He opens his first ever store, Virgin Records. And in life, I think that we all, in business, in our personal life, we face challenges, we face setbacks, we face disappointments. Sometimes we experience successes. But even so, it's never just the event. It's how we respond that influences the outcome. So the whole essence of SUMO is, look, two people, two businesses, two communities, two families can have the same event, but they can end up with a different outcome. Why? Because of the R factor. It's how we respond. So that's the kind of the foundation to my SUMO principles. Then I take a little bit of a tour around the SUMO house, if you like. One of the main rooms in the house is simply called this: change your t-shirt. And it's all about how sometimes people, if you can imagine that what you think about yourself or you think about life was encapsulated in a word or a phrase and was on your t-shirt, what would your message be? Because I think, in the UK, I read some people might as well have this message on their t-shirt, miserable bugger. And I'm talking about the fact that sometimes people's message on their t-shirt is victim, just one word, victim. And their response to life is they wear that t-shirt that blames someone else. They want to blame the economy, blame their bank manager, blame their customers, blame their spouses, blame their children, blame the traffic, blame the weather. There's always someone else to blame. And that whole principle is saying, guys, come on, wake up, smell the coffee. Change the t-shirt. We've got to take some responsibility. We're not always responsible for what happens to us, but we are responsible for how we respond to it. So let's take off that t-shirt of victim and take one that has more about I am responsible instead. So that's one of the main SUMO principles. A second one is this: develop fruity thinking. And someone, when I was doing a seminar in the States, said, Paul, you need to be aware that the term fruity thinking has some sexual connotations in the US. Well, hey, you know what? It does in the UK as well. But what I'm really talking about is we talk about fruit being good for the body. I'm wanting to talk about fruit being good for the mind. And I'm quite happy and comfortable to use that phrase, fruity thinking because it stops people in their tracks. It gives them some emotional connection. They go, hey, what's that about? And you know what, Wade? It's all based upon, I guess, this question. Besides God, if you believe in God, who is the most important person you are ever going to talk to? And the answer, yourself. And in that whole sumo principle, I really unpack and explore in more detail the crucial conversations we have with ourselves every day inside our own minds, and how sometimes our thinking is not fruity, it's faulty. And the consequence of faulty thinking is going to increase your stress and your anxiety. It's going to decrease your confidence and your motivation. That is not a winning formula for any potential successful entrepreneur. So I reveal what those 4 types of faulty thinking are. Then I give the reader some strategies on how they can shut up some of that faulty thinking and move on to some fruity thinking. So that's 2 of the principles. A third one, which is quite an interesting one, and some people think it's quite a controversial one, is hippo time is okay. What do hippos do in mud? They wallow. And one of the things that I want to suggest to my reader and to my listener is this. You know what? Sometimes when we get a setback, we can't immediately just shut up and move on. We need some hippo time. We need to have a wallow. And this is a really crucial point. It's okay to not always feel okay. To feel mad, bad, or sad. Hey, you know what? It's legitimate. We're allowed to experience those feelings. And I give the reader permission to recognize that sometimes we're going to have a tough time, a tough period. But the other point to make clear is this. This too will pass. It's a season. It's not a life sentence. Hippo time's okay, but it's temporary. And life is just too short and too precious to spend too long wallowing in hippo time. So that's a really important principle that I look at that really gives, again, some authenticity and some reality to my message, that we can't always be on top of the world. I'm a tiger, feeling awesome. Sometimes we've got to acknowledge those dips that we have in the roller coaster of life. The 4th sumo principle is called remember the beach ball. And what I'd like you, the listener, to do right now, and Wade, if you can imagine this as well, I want you to imagine that there is a big beach ball and you and I are sat opposite each other with this beach ball in the middle of us. And this beach ball has 6 colors. But from where I'm looking at this beach ball, I'm just seeing 3. Blue, white, and green. But from where you and the listener are sitting, you're seeing 3 other colors: red, yellow, and orange. So we're looking at the same thing, the same object, but we're seeing things completely differently. And very often, I think people are conditioned to think, well, if I'm seeing things one way, and you, my customer, my colleague, my partner, my child, if you're seeing things completely the opposite, we can't both be right. One of us has to be wrong. And guess what? It ain't me. Well, I'm saying, shut up thinking that your perspective on this beach ball is the only perspective there is, and move on to see where other people are coming from. And if we're to be successful in life, it's going to be determined by the quality of our relationships, both in work and out of work. And we need to make sure we get some really good strategic and essential beach ball conversations with other people. So that principle really unpacks and lifts the lid on about the quality of our conversations and building better relationships with others. The final 2 sumo principles are as follows. Learn Latin. And you don't need to learn much. Just 2 words will be fine. Carpe diem. Translate that into English. What have you got? Seize the day. And life does not reward, no offense, people just listening to this show. Life does not reward you putting a business plan together. Life does not reward you thinking about what you're going to do. Life ultimately rewards action. You listen to this show, you take action. You do the business plan, you implement it. You have your dream, you start setting goals and implementing them. And it's all about, we need to sometimes, carpe diem, actually seize the day. And what that chapter explores, Wade, is 6 reasons why we don't take action. We might be fired up, we might be enthused, but there are things that sabotage our success because we don't turn ideas and thinking into action. That chapter looks at those 6 pitfalls to our success and gives you specific ways to overcome them. The final SUMO principle, and I don't want to cause any offense here, but it's simply called this: ditch Doris Day. Now, she is an amazing American icon. I know she's still alive at the time of this interview. And she sang a song, I think it was back in 1956, called Que Sera, Sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. Well, with respect, Doris, and with respect to your listener, I don't think that's the most compelling philosophy and approach to have on life. Sometimes we need to ditch the que sera, sera, whatever will be approach to life and go, let's create a vision of the kind of things we would like to see happen in our future. Can we control everything? No, we can't. But can we create some things? Yes, we can. And what that principle also explores is the big, big myth around something called work-life balance. That is one of the biggest guilt trips anyone's going to have when they try and think, I need to get work-life balance. It ain't balance that we need. It's getting the blend right. Not the balance, but the blend. And that principle, Ditch Doris Day, helps people to think about their future. Think about it not just in terms of their career and their work, but in some other areas of their lives as well. And make sure that we get the blend right by looking at not just, as I say, one area of our life, but a whole range of areas. And recognize the blend is what's important, not the balance. So in a nutshell, Wade, that is what my SUMO book is about.
Paul, you did a phenomenal job of taking us through. And there were so many different things that I could ask a million questions on and expound upon it. But actually, we're looking, so you've already put it into a nutshell, and now we're asking you to break it down even a step further in the next question, which sometimes, quite frankly, I feel like it's a mean question because you already did a great job of breaking it down. But if the reader can only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of your entire book, everything you just discussed with us, what would you personally want that to be?
Take responsibility and move on.
That's absolutely huge.
That's in a nutshell what it's all about. But I just spent about 30,000 other words to expand on that.
Well, and this next question might even go in conjunction with it as well, because you said numerous things are quote worthy that I think people should, put up in front of them and look at on a daily basis. But that's the next question as well. Is there something that you wrote in your book that has really resonated with your audience? And can you take a minute to explain what that quote means to you?
Sure. I think since the book came out in 2005, I continue to come up with new insights. My material continues to evolve. And, I've faced some challenges both in my business and in my personal life. And I came up with this little phrase recently, and it's resonated with a lot of people, and you can take it in a number of different ways. And it's simply this: seeking support is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. And I think in all areas of our lives, entrepreneurs can think, I've got to do this on my own. I'm the one that makes it happen. And we have to be the people that make things happen, but we don't have to do it alone. Sometimes we need a mentor, we need a coach, we need a partner alongside us, either professionally or personally. We might need members of our family, close friends. Let's recognize that if we're trying to do it all on our own, we need to resign from being the general manager of the universe and recognize you can't do it alone. You need the support of others. And seeking the support of others is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom.
That is excellent. And Paul, so many of our listeners are actually mobile right now, working out on their way or back from the office. and such. So we're going to put that in the show notes at the elpodcast.com. And Paul, we're to our final question, and we're going to step away from your book for just a second, but we're asking for not any recommendation. We are asking for the recommendation. So if there's only one book you could recommend based on the way that it's changed your life, maybe created a paradigm shift or a lifestyle shift, which book would you suggest?
I think, you know what? You pushed me into a corner. Am I allowed to have two, or do you want to just go for the one?
You can mention two if you'd like.
Okay, I'll mention two. One of them is one that's probably mentioned over and over again, but 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey had a massively profound impact on me. You've got to work hard on it. You've got to wade through some of the material. You've got to be enthusiastic and committed to reading that book. But I think enthusiasm and commitment is worth it, because there's so many depths of truth and insight and wisdom dripping from every page in that book. And actually the privilege a few years ago of speaking at a conference with Dr. Stephen Covey in Australia, that was a paradigm shift. But another one which is very different, very accessible. You don't have to engage the brain too much, because these guys write in such an accessible and memorable way. It would be, again, by 2 American authors. They're 2 brothers called Dan and Chip Heath. And they wrote a book called Made to Stick. And where Covey's book is all about, I guess, a life philosophy, particularly aimed at the individual, Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath is all about how you transform, how you communicate your ideas. And, we can be brilliant experts in our field, but we don't always have the ability or the insight or the knowledge to communicate those messages and those insights in a way that helps other people understand our message. I know the words to songs doesn't make me a great singer. And many of us know our business and our product really well, but that doesn't mean we're good at communicating those ideas to others. So 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey and Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath.
Excellent, Paul. Fantastic recommendations. I appreciate that. And before we depart, can you recommend the best way for listeners to not only get more information on you, but also get more information on your book, S.U.M.O, Shut Up, Move On?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's available on Amazon.com. You can get that right now. I was just checking the site before, because just checking that you got them over in the States. And to find out more about me, my material, and my approach, go to my website, thesumoguy.com. And, I visit the States at least twice a year. So if any of your audience are wanting to find out when I'm going to be in their area, perhaps they can send me an email, which they can do via my website. And you can also follow me on Twitter at the Sumo Guy.
Excellent. Paul, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us today.
It's been a pleasure, Wade, and I hope people find it really beneficial. And if they do, let me know. And if they don't, my name wasn't Paul Mcgee, it was somebody else.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Paul or his book, S.U.M.O, Shut Up, Move On, check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.